I have recorded quite a few episodes over the years about food styling, food photography, how to choose props, that sort of thing. However, I have never recorded an episode on this topic that has brought so many novel ideas to me. Ashley Freeman from Little Black Skillet joins me in this interview, and she provided so many details about food styling and food photography that I had never thought of ever before. So I think you're going to find some really good ideas, even if you are a more advanced food photographer and food stylist, that you can use in your food photography. She talks about setting yourself up for success. She talks about the equipment she uses, props. She has so many good ideas for props, you guys. Composition is an important detail for food styling, which I feel you can develop over time, but she gives some tips for that. Also, just the fact that we need to practice constantly in order to get better. I absolutely loved this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. It is episode number 654. Hi, Ashley. Thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited too. So you joined me and a couple other bloggers on a recent podcast, which by the time this publishes, people will have heard that. So you were one of those newer bloggers who has found success in various ways. So thank you for joining me for a second time.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it again.
Yay. Okay, we're going to talk today about food styling and how to improve that and make your photos stand out from the rest, because you do have a background in photography, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But before we get to all of that, do you have a fun fact to share with us?
I do, and it's actually quite timely. My grandmother was the first woman Undersecretary of the Treasury for the Jimmy Carter administration.
No.
Yes.
That is the coolest.
She taught me how to cook as well as my mom, and broke the glass ceiling, and just was a big, woman pioneer, and someone that I really looked up to. So
I got chills as you were talking about that. That is so cool. I just love, especially older badass women, because back then it was really hard to be a badass.
Definitely.
And the people who were just are so inspiring. I think that is awesome. And Jimmy Carter, he just passed away, right? A few weeks ago.
Yep.
At age 100 or something. He lived forever.
Incredible person.
He was a good person. One of those few.
I know.
That is actually a good person. Sorry to offend anyone, if I offended anyone. Anyway, I don't talk about politics on eBlog Talk, so moving on. But I do love that fun fact. That is so cool. And has your grandmother passed away?
We actually lost her in September. So
oh my gosh, so recently.
Well, and the fact that they kind of passed around the same time, that's just, I don't know, this kind of neat. Maybe they're hanging out together, eating a bowl of grits.
Absolutely. That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right. You are here to talk about food styling. I love your story with how you got started with your blog, because it's a little bit different than the norm. So tell us a little bit about that and what Little Black Skillet is all about.
Yeah. So I actually started so I went to college. My undergraduate degree was in journalism, and then I got an internship at Coastal Living magazine, which back then was a division of Southern Progress. So Southern Living magazine, Cooking Light. It's like a big umbrella. And my dream growing up, being from Savannah, Georgia, was to work for Southern Living along with many other of my friends. And so that's why I applied for that internship. And I was paired with a food editor. I didn't even know that job even existed. And so after I finished my internship, I went to culinary school, and then landed a job in the test kitchen for Oxmoor House, which was the book division for Southern Living and Cooking Like, all those under that umbrella. And it was like my dream job. I started in the test kitchen developing recipes. And then one day they were short on a food stylist, and I was volunteered to do it, and just jumped right in and discovered that I actually really loved it and had a knack for it. And then I moved over to the editorial side and was a cookbook editor for a bunch of
Wow.
years before meeting my now husband. Birmingham is where we were located, and he's a marine biologist and was getting
Ooh.
his PhD. And of course, Birmingham is landlocked. So we moved to Florida, and I became a freelancer. And so kind of took all of my skills that I had learned there, and I really focused in on the food styling stuff because I had some connections in Savannah, where I'm from, and did cookbooks and the whole gamut. So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's my long, drawn out story of how I got to where
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, I don't know, I just got this feeling I wanted to do something for myself. I was doing all these recipes and photos and cookbooks for other people, and that was great. But I don't know, I had this desire to have my own community, connect
Yeah.
with people. And so that's when I started my blog. I launched it in the fall of 2023. So I'm still kind of a
Okay.
newbie.
Yeah.
Um,
And your blog has found some great successes in a short time as
it's
well.
been really great. And I think I love it. It is like so fun. Every day is just, I mean, of course, there are some things like, you know, GA4 and
Yeah.
SEO. And I mean,
Right.
you know,
There's
we
so
all have
many
our pain
pieces that we
points.
can't like it all, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I love your
Exactly.
story and how you kind of fell into what you love. That doesn't often happen where something accidentally falls into your lap and you end up loving it. That's the
Yeah.
coolest thing ever. So, food styling was one of those first things where you were like, oh, this really inspires me.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, because think about it, like we eat with our eyes first. I mean, everyone, when you go to a restaurant, a lot of people, before they even eat, they take a picture of their food with their phone, right? And so,
Yeah.
I don't know, like I just love making beautiful food and something
Yeah.
that's so yummy, and you want to dive right in.
I know. And you can tell, I'm just looking at your site, your, your visuals are great. I love your
Thank you.
colors and just the way that you've captured everything. You have some great scenes. Okay, let's talk about it because I need to learn from you. Uh, so, since this is a piece of the puzzle that you really love, you have some tips for us
I
for
do.
those people who might need a little bit extra hand holding in this area. So, how do we go about setting ourselves up for success with this? Does it start with camera, lens? Where do we get started?
Yeah, so the big thing, I think the big takeaway is you don't really need a ton of, you know, lighting or lights and all the things. So I have kind of my must haves. I do recommend getting a really good camera. I have a Nikon DSLR. I know a lot of food photographers that use Canon, so it's honestly what you feel comfortable with. Um, we had gotten a Nikon because my husband's father was a big photographer and had tons of Nikon lenses, and so that's why we went with that one, was
Nice.
because we could use the lenses,
Yeah.
But I feel comfortable with the camera, and I think that's the big thing is whatever makes your life easier. You don't need all the fancy schmancy
Yeah.
expensive things. It's just whatever
Right.
works best for you.
So, starting off with a solid camera is
Yeah.
a must. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a zoom lens that I use the majority of the time. So that's another way to, you don't need to have 45 different lenses
Yeah.
necessarily.
Right. 45 is a lot. And yeah, I agree. I found a lens that I love, a zoom lens that I loved a couple of years ago, and I don't need anything else. Honestly,
Yeah.
it does such a good job with food. It is currently broken, by the way, but
Oh, bummer.
I know I need to get that fixed. It does such a good job that I was like, I don't need to look for another lens. So once you find that magic lens, stick with it for a while, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I really couldn't live without is my tripod. So I shoot with a tripod just because, I don't know, I tend to be shaky and I want everything to be in focus. So the one I use is I always will probably pronounce this incorrectly, but a Manfrotto, It's
Oh,
an
yeah.
Italian brand, very well known.
I like how you said it. Manfrotto.
Yes. If you say it in an accent, then if it's wrong,
Yes,
it
it's
doesn't matter,
cooler.
right? Yeah. So it has a horizontal column. So what you can do is you can lift it up and then bend it over, so you can do overhead shots. It also has it's a geared head, so you can like tilt it down for 3/4 shots, or whatever. It's very versatile.
Hmm.
So I'd say invest in those two things for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And then for editing software, I use Lightroom. There's also Capture One that a bunch of my friends use, but I don't know, my brain tends to work with Lightroom. I'm not very techie. So
yeah, Lightroom's so easy.
It's so easy.
Intuitive and
right.
a piece of cake. And I feel like people are kind of led to one editing software and then they stick with it. So whatever you naturally are kind of drawn to, you'll use probably forever.
Exactly. Yeah. And I tend to have analysis paralysis. So if there's anything I have to learn that's new, it's like super overwhelming for me. So like I'm a Lightroom person.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah.
At least.
I love Lightroom. I use Lightroom in tandem with Photoshop. So I'm old school. I'm a graphic designer. I learned Photoshop extensively when I was younger, in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I kind of go back to some of the things I learned there, just that I feel like can't be done anywhere else. So I'll do like Lightroom, and then if I need tweaks, I'll bring it to Photoshop. But that's probably not necessary. Whatever is your process that you end up with, stick with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have other equipment, like little tools? So camera, lens, you mentioned the Manfrotto, the tripod, and then anything little that you like as far as styling goes. So I'm thinking like
Q-tips, if you have a little smudge you don't like. Also have a set of like small paintbrushes from the kiddie aisle from IKEA. They're great little brushes, but like really any.
Yeah.
You want them to be quality enough that the bristles won't fall off into your food, because that's no fun to edit.
Ew, yeah. Or eat.
Yeah. And then also tweezers. I have several different if you find, I don't get too precious when I do food styling for my blog, so I won't like move a parsley unless it's really weird. Yeah. But tweezers are great for that.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes those little things get in the way and you're like, ooh, I don't want to stick my finger in there, right?
No. Yeah.
So you got to figure out a way to move it around. Anything else for equipment?
I think those are my major ones. Paper towels. I use Windex wipes are very helpful. Like if you have like greasy smudges on glassware or anything, then those are great.
I feel like smudges are something that are often overlooked. Like you look at the food and you forget to look around the food.
Totally.
So you have to train your brain to kind of see those smudges. It took me a long time to realize that, like, oh, that plate is full of fingerprints and smudges and oil and.
Well, and that's for me too. Like, I'm used to working on a team. I'm usually the food stylist, and then you have a photographer and you have a prop stylist. And so I'm usually just focused on the food. And so when I started taking photos for my blog, that was an adjustment for me too, because I had to look for everything. Or I'd find it later in Lightroom, like, dang it.
Yes,
I missed that fingerprint.
You see it while you're editing and you're like, well, how did I not see that on the plate or through my viewfinder? It's so funny how that happens. Yeah. Okay, so equipment we've got. And I'm wondering, so this is where I kind of lack props. I'm so simplistic. I tend to I'm kind of lazy. So I'll go with the basics, like the basics, simple. But I love it when I see scenes that are propped and just looking so nice and styled and patterned and all of that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on props?
This is one of my favorite parts of food styling. We actually joke that the reason why I went into having a blog is so that I had a way to use all these
Nice.
treasures, as I call them, that I find at like antique malls and stuff. And often, like, if I do see something that I really love, I will develop a recipe just so I can use it.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
So yeah, but like you said, I mean, going simple, that's totally fine. For me, like, because this food blogging world, I feel like I was late to the game since I just started, and it feels a little oversaturated. And so I was trying to figure out a way to make myself stand out.
Mhm.
And honestly, like, I feel like props and what I use can help me do that. So with that said, though, you don't have to spend a ton of money. Because I mean, I'm still a new blog too. So budget is very important.
Yeah.
So like I'll go to like Home Goods or antique malls, like I mentioned. Thrift stores have lots of great things. Or I'll go shopping in my mom's cabinet when I go visit
Nice. Great idea. I love that.
her. You can recycle like pickle jars. You can wash in the dishwasher and they work great with all of the labels on it. And there's so many things you can do. I think the key is you don't want to use something that's going to detract from the food. So something with like a super busy pattern, that I would stay away from that. So you don't have to go white all the time.
Yeah.
But that's something to keep in mind when you're looking for props.
Okay. I was looking at your, let's see, I think it's the Marry Me chicken pasta recipe. And your ingredient shot is unlike any I've ever seen outside
to look at that.
Your blog, because
I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Ingredient shots to me are boring and basic, which I think is, I mean, it's fine. That's how I do mine, boring and basic. But yours is so perfect. It's just this perfect composition. And I love the backdrop that you use. And you've got, I mean, it's styled, but it looks natural too. It's really cool how you did that.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's another, I don't know. I have, when we built our house, we had an extra room and it was going to become my office. Like that was a big reason why we bought this house. And I have a whole wall with all my props. And like, sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, I'll just go in there and like look at all my little bowls and things. And so like the ingredient shots are a way for me to use all these little things that I've picked up that just make me happy.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Oh, your props make you happy.
They do.
They're fun, aren't they? Just the colors and the textures, talking about placemats and backdrops and dishes and all the different patterns. There's so much that if you're that creative-minded individual, like most of us are, it's just this creative world. So I totally know what you mean, how that can make you happy.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anything else with props that you would recommend? I love your suggestion to just go to your mom's house or maybe your grandma's house or something.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to spend a ton of money or any at all. So when I'm buying props, I tend to go for smaller things. So like, even if you're shooting like a main dish, I would go for either a salad plate sized, because unless, you have a giant piece of chicken, it's going to kind of swallow, which, I mean, that is kind of what you buy, but it might look a little weird once you take a picture of it. So like smaller plates and like juice glass height, because when you have your angle of your shot, usually smaller, it's like the proportions end up looking better when you take that photograph.
Yeah.
Oh, for linens, one tip that I actually I don't know why I didn't think of this, but another food stylist was doing is you go to a fabric store and they have remnants, super cheap. And you can just get, I mean, because you don't need a pack of 8 napkins usually. You
Yeah.
only need like a couple. So like you can go to a fabric store and get some quote unquote napkins, just get little pieces of fabric, and it's like so cheap.
Great idea. Another great
Yeah.
idea. Never would have thought of that. What about backdrops? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, so backdrops. I love to use the vinyl ones that can just roll up and you can tuck away, because I mean, a lot of us don't really have a lot of space for storage. And actually, some of my friends, a food photographer and a food prop stylist, they started a surfaces company, Southern Ash Surfaces. So I use a lot of their backdrops, and actually we'll share a discount code, and you can get 20% off. They're offering a really great deal for.
And are those the roll up variety?
They are. And that's a lot of what I use. But I've also made my own. My husband loves to do he loves an excuse to go to Lowe's. So
yes.
So that was right up his alley. But those pallets that you find by the dumpster that people are getting rid of, those make great surfaces. All you have to do is, they're usually like, there's big spaces in between each board. So you have to pull them off and, push them together. But I mean, that's like another free way to create a surface. You can paint it whatever you want to. I also have gone to home improvement stores and just looked for like sheets of random product, like there's a concrete one that I have. I don't know what it's used for, but it makes a great surface. Anyways, there's lots of places where you can look for that. You can spread plaster on sheets of plywood, use a spackle brush or a spackle tool. I mean, there's
great ideas. Yeah. You're giving us so many budget ideas for styling. This is great. I never would have thought of the palette either.
Yeah.
That's great.
Super easy.
Okay. Should we move on to composition? Because I think composition is super important and something that you definitely learn over time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your thoughts on composition?
So I think one thing that's really helped with me, now that I am a one-woman show, like I have to think of everything, I usually plan out my photos ahead of time. So when I am testing the recipe, I usually test using the casserole dish or the soup bowl or whatever that I am thinking that I want to shoot it in, so that I kind of get a visual of it ahead of time. That way, if I need to make a change, I'm not doing it like on the spot. Yeah. I also try to figure out the best angle for the image first. So if it's a drink, usually it's going to be a straight on shot. And that kind of helps me. I'm a big planner.
A lot of food bloggers are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that really helps too. And then I set up my scene before I do anything. So if I need to do a stand-in, I'll kind of have the idea of the color of what it's going to be. So if it's a brown food, I will maybe put a crumpled up paper bag in a bowl, so I can kind of see what the colors are going to be. I really use color theory when I set up my shots. So I'm a Southern girl, and a lot of the foods I make are brown. We have lots of brown food.
Yep. Casseroles.
Exactly. So parsley goes a long way, but also colorful props. So I found that blue really goes well with brown. So you'll see blue in a lot of my photos. Like a colorful napkin or a glass that has water in it. Just something to add a little more oomph to the scene. Trying to think what else. I usually use multiples. Multiples tend to be more pleasing in the eye for the eye. So like 3 bowls of soup, or you can even have like a pot of soup in the middle, but then like an odd number of things kind of in the background.
Okay. And do you go with odd number most of the time?
I typically do. There will be, like, for drinks, I'll have 2. I don't know, just when I've tried to do 1, it feels naked to me. And that's just a gut feeling. I mean, unless you're like super into it. If it's a far back shot, I try to have some things in there. Let me think what else.
Can you talk more about color theories in case somebody doesn't know what you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. So if you'll see, you can Google it. You can look up a color wheel. And so I usually go with complementary colors. So it's like on a color wheel, you'll have your color and it's whatever color is directly across from it. So like yellow and purple. It's just colors that go together that are either they're opposites or they're like close to each other.
Like blue, I think, is it blue and orange that are opposite?
Orange,
I experimented with that for a while, and that pops for food photography. I loved that combo for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The color wheel is really cool. If you look at it, the color wheel for me is kind of like props for you. I just love colors and art and opportunity to put different things together. So I love looking at colors and like those Pantone. I'm sure as a stylist, you know what I'm talking about. Those Pantone paper samples that you can just like, I could look at those for days. And the same goes for the color wheel. Just like, oh, these colors go really well together, or these do not.
Right.
I just find that so inspiring.
Yeah, it's really fun too. Really fun.
I know, we get so nerdy about the funniest things, don't we?
Yes.
Anything else for composition? So I like your use of odd numbers and multiples too. I think that's really important. So if you have a stack of plates, you stack plates and then multiple pieces of silverware too?
Yeah. So one thing I do is like I'll close my eyes and then I'll look at the photo. And if my eye is going to one particular place and I don't want it to, then I know I need to make a change. So like a stack of plates, if it's too jarring, I'll like put a napkin on top and maybe some forks. Like obviously you want the food to be the focus. So that's a trick that I do. Also, you want your eye to move around the photo. You don't want to be just stuck on one thing. So the direction of your fork, if it points up to the right, like you want your eye to move around. So that's another thing that I'll look for when I close my eyes and look at the photo.
Okay. That's a good point. I was wondering about, I'm just so intrigued by your ingredient shots because the kind of standard, like I said earlier, basic and simple, it's fine. Most people capture the ingredients so that there's white space all around them. I do this too. But you capture ingredients so that some of the ingredients are actually leading off the screen, which is so intriguing because that kind of tells a story, like there's more here.
Yeah.
So did you accidentally land on that? Is this something you purposefully do?
I just like the way it looked.
Yeah.
I went with
it
my
looks
gut,
good,
which is something I do often. And I didn't want it to be an afterthought. I mean, because that's kind of how we just rush through the step-by-step photos and the ingredients. But like, I don't know. I just was having fun with it. So
yeah, it looks so good. It's very inspiring. And then I am wondering about, sometimes not in your photos, but in some other photos, some of the food that's kind of scattered around a scene can look unnatural. Do you know what I mean? Like if you use, I don't know, like rice in a dish or something, and then there's like grains of rice. Grains of rice laying around. It's like, wait, that isn't actually what would happen if you were serving this dish.
Right.
So do you have thoughts on that?
I don't like that, which I know is like I don't want it to sound judgy. But I want it to be like, I want someone to feel like they have just arrived at this scene. I want it to be approachable. So if you have a cooked rice and there's raw rice, I'm like, oh, am I about to dig into this dish of raw rice?
Yeah.
You know? So on the one hand, I try to embrace the mess. I want it to feel natural and not stuffy or perfect, which is hard for me because I am a perfectionist. But I don't know. I feel like if you have crumbs or some Parmesan cheese that's fallen out of the bowl, that's, off to the side, like I feel like that's natural. That's what would naturally happen. And it kind of invites the reader to, dive in, feel like they can do it too.
Right. So something natural that you would actually encounter if you came upon this scene,
Right.
Not like, oh, I dropped my rice before cooking it. Oops, on the counter. Here you go. I'm going to serve you cooked rice.
Yeah, exactly.
That probably is not going to happen. And yeah, not to judge. Like if you do that, it's fine. Maybe it works for you and your blog. Totally. But yeah, just running through some different options here. I'm kind of obsessively looking through your recipes right now because you do such a good job with composition. I think that is such an important piece of it. The thing I talked about earlier with your ingredients shots, kind of going out of the scene, you do that also with your hero shots, which I think is really cool. Like just a quarter of a bowl of rice on the top or something.
Right.
And that is kind of a hint that there's more going on here. It's not just what is in the frame. There's a scene or an event or something happening that's bigger than this picture, which is really cool.
Yeah, I find that gives a feeling of, it makes you feel welcome, kind of like you're not an outsider. It's like you're a part of it. And that's what I try to evoke in my photos.
Yeah. So you mentioned embrace the mess.
Yes.
Talk about that. What do you mean by embrace the mess?
Yeah, so cheese that's fallen out of the bowl, or parsley that, oops, you were garnishing your plate and you missed. I love drips and ooey gooey, like just something that makes people want to, I have to make that. Like that's the goal. But also I want to make it approachable. Yes, I do have a culinary degree and I do this for a living, but like you can make this too. Like that's kind of the idea that I'm always thinking of when I'm doing these photos, is I want it to be approachable.
Yeah, people like approachable these days. They like real, they like messes, as long as the mess makes sense.
Right.
And that's refreshing, I think.
Yeah, so like if I have a piece of cake on a plate, I will take one of, a perfect slice, but then I'll also take photos of a bite taken out. And that's usually 99% of the time, that's the photo I go with. Just because it feels real.
Right.
Lived in.
Yeah. People feel like they took the bite.
Exactly.
It is a real scene. So the lesson or moral there is if you do drop a crumb or your parsley goes somewhere else, flies off the plate, try it, right? And just see how it looks. It might be awesome.
Yeah, so with that in mind too, I do have some food styling like tricks I've learned.
Oh, let's hear it. Yeah.
So you want cheese to look ooey gooey. Sometimes that's really tricky, like especially if your mac and cheese or whatever has been sitting on the scene for a while. If you brush it with a little bit of like vegetable oil in one of those brushes, it looks hot and fresh. Same with like chocolate chips on a cookie. If you just brush it with a little oil, it looks ooey gooey, like it just came out of the oven. So like when I do food styling, when you say, oh, I'm a food stylist, people think you've put motor oil on your pancakes or, like fake stuff. And I don't do any of that. I mean, I do things that enhance it. Because at the end of the day, I want whoever makes this recipe to like, they can achieve this too. like, of course I will do a few things to like make it look the best it can. But, if you want a stack of pancakes, you don't have to use motor oil on top for it to look,
Yeah, absolutely.
delicious.
Yep.
With pancakes in mind, I do have a trick for getting like that perfect drip. If you buy a bottle of the cheap, like Aunt Jemima syrup, and you boil it down for a little bit, you make it super thick.
Oh.
You can put it on top of the pancake and it'll drip. Like you can kind of pull it down with your tweezers and it'll stay.
Oh.
So if you want to get like a really nice drip shot and it's just you and you don't have, someone able to click the photo, that works really well.
That is so great. I never would have thought of that. Love that. Does that work with any other ingredients for drip shots?
Not for drips. I love to use Cool Whip for whipped cream as a alternative because it stays.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is like time is your enemy, right? When you're shooting a photograph. So any little tricks that I use, it's like just to extend the time that I can take the shot.
Yeah, to think through that too, just to take the time. Like, if this is frozen, it's going to last a little bit longer. And
shooting ice cream is like the worst thing ever.
It is. That's why I stopped making ice cream recipes because it's so hard. Do you have any tips for ice cream?
Dry ice works really well. So you can like pre-portion scoops. I'll pre-portion scoops and I'll freeze those. Honestly though, like it's a little different shooting for my blog versus like a commercial client. I mean, I've made fake ice cream before when we're not selling ice cream. Honestly, like melty ice cream that's real. That's real life.
Yeah, right.
So I'll just freeze the scoops ahead of time, like overnight, and that makes them last a little bit longer. Or use dry ice if it's like July and I'm trying to shoot ice cream.
Right. In the middle of summer.
Right.
Any other food styling tips you can think of?
Yes. So one of my favorite tools it's a grill starter. So I actually call it the Home Alone tool. When he puts the little thing on the doorknob, it's like the grill.
Yes. Yeah.
So that makes great grill marks. And it's electric grill starter is its technical term, not the Home Alone tool. But if you've grilled something and your grill marks are not like very prominent, you can use that. You just heat it up and you
nice. Oh gosh.
And then also if you overcook steak, grenadine, if you paint grenadine in the center, it'll make it look more rare.
Oh.
So.
Wow. There are at least 10 things you've mentioned that I never would have thought of in this interview. So mind blown. Thank you, Ashley. Anything else for food styling?
I think those are the biggies.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of info there.
Yeah. Well, if you think of anything else before we say goodbye, pop in.
Honestly, like if anyone will share my contact info, but I love sharing this with people. So if someone wants to like reach out and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this recipe or whatever, like I would love to hear from them.
Okay. That's very generous of you. Thank you. And then one last thing I wanted to ask about before we start saying goodbye is just, I mean, we all kind of know this, but in order to get better, you've got to practice and you've got to stick with it and you just have to keep improving publishing, even if things aren't perfect. So talk about that. Yeah.
Like, honestly, that's my best advice is just practice. My background in food styling is I showed up and they needed a food stylist. And so I went with my gut, and I've had several clients where I've had the opportunity to take photos, and I don't know, I think I've just gotten better the more I do it.
Yeah.
One thing that I have done that's really helped is I will go on Pinterest or I guess Google Images and see what photos I'm drawn to and like what I like about them. Study the photo, like, oh, I really like their lighting or their angle or the way that they, I don't know, made this casserole look great or whatever. And I figure out what it is I like about that. And then I use that when I'm creating photos too. The other thing that I think is really important that's kind of hard to do is like, it's great to be inspired by images, but don't copy. I think that's an easy thing to do is you see someone having success doing a certain thing, like that's great. But the whole idea is to like create your own look while still being inspired by what other people are doing.
Yeah, it's great to be inspired, but maybe just seeing it as you are taking elements from like colors or patterns or textures, props, etc., like you mentioned, and making it your own.
Right.
Yeah. It is kind of scary because you don't, I know, sometimes I am so inspired by things that I see that I'm like, I have to be careful not to like copy that, you know, like even if you're like, oh my gosh, this image is exactly what I want to convey. You have to be so careful because, I mean, that's a real thing. Copying the way people take their photos, people have gotten in big trouble for that. So you do have to be aware and just be very careful.
Right. Well, and the whole point too is you want to stand out. So you want people to be like, oh, that is a photo from Little Black Skillet or not.
Yeah.
You know, they're copying, that looks like Half-Baked Harvest or, you know, whatever. It's easy to do.
Yeah, it is. So Ashley's saying practice, practice, practice. Don't give up. Keep putting stuff out there, even if it feels like it's not perfect. Do you have any other last bits of advice before we start saying goodbye, Ashley?
I don't know. I think like over time, my look has kind of developed. So yeah, just practice, feel whatever makes you light up. I don't know. I feel like that shows for sure. So, I don't know.
You've mentioned a few times using your intuition. So I think that is probably a key point too, is just leaning into that and what lights you up and continue to practice and put stuff out there. And eventually you're going to have this look that is you and that you can be proud of, right?
Right.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing all of your wisdom and insights. I seriously gained so much from our chat today, and I know others will as well. So we appreciate you and just joining us today.
It was great.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Yeah.
Do you have either a favorite quote or words of inspiration to leave us with?
I do, and it's kind of my mantra, which is going to sound really silly when y'all hear it, but it's fake it till you make it. A lot of times when I'm food styling, I'm like, I look at something and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But then I pretend it's like all about your mindset. It's like you have to get out of your own way and you just pretend that you're like the expert in it. So I'm like, this might be tricky to do, but you just go for it. And I don't know, it's always done well for me. So you trust your gut and just go for it. Fake it until you make it.
I love it. The subtitle of this chat should be Trust Your Gut.
Yes. Definitely.
You've said that a handful of times, which I love. I think that's so important in photography, but also in food blogging and entrepreneurship, right?
Totally. It's there for a reason.
Yeah. And we don't lean into it enough, I think, as humans. Right. So when you get that nudge, follow it.
Exactly.
Well, we'll put together a show notes page for you, Ashley, if anyone wants to go look at those. We'll put everything in there that we talked about today. You can find those at eatblogtalk.com/Little Black Skillet. Tell everyone where they can find you, Ashley.
littleblackskillet.com is the link for my blog, and then you can find me on Instagram. My handle is Little Black Skillet, and then over on Facebook, I'm Ashley Strickland Freeman.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ashley, so much, and thank you for listening, food bloggers. I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this topic, be sure to watch the video shown on the screen. See you next time.